Hello friends, welcome. I am Mohammad Tariq. I am going to take all the classes related to history optionals for all those students who are appearing in 2021 civil services. Not only civil services, but even if you are preparing for state services, whether it is UP or Bihar, Rajasthan or MP, Karnataka or Tamil Nadu, history of India would remain same. Now, in this session, first I am going to tell you why history is important for civil services exam right from the British period and post independent history. One of the optional which has maintained its charm and popularity throughout the journey of Indian civil services, whether it was ICS era or IAS era. First important reason that civil services exam is mainly for all India services. Once you are in service like IAS and IPS, you have to know about India, Indian culture, Indian past. And that's the reason why right from the beginning, one part of the syllabus, whether it is in general studies or essay or in your interview or personality test, would be based from history and culture. Many students opt history optional because it helps in paper 1, it helps in paper 2, that is the background of Indian constitution up till 1950. It helps in paper 4 where you have ethics and morality, in which you have to know about Buddha and Mahavira, about Vivekananda and Gandhi, about Tagore and many more personalities of India who laid the foundation of what is called India's ethos, its philosophy. Administration is based on certain principle. It is based on certain ideas. It is based on certain circumstances and requirements. So, in paper 4, if you are good in history, you can write better and score better. One paper which is nowadays very decisive in selection or rejection of a candidate is essay paper, and we all know that essay 250 marks is very important. One can get 150 plus, one can get less than 100, and that 40 50 marks can be very decisive factors. If you have seen the last 5-year questions of essay, there would be at least 2 questions in that essay paper which you can attempt in better way if you have a background of history. Most of you who are appearing in civil services examination do not have background of forget history, even social sciences, because what we know that you have done your engineering or some professional courses. So your knowledge about India's culture, its past, its various philosophy, its various ideologies are honestly speaking very superficial. We are here to help you how to build up that base so that you can use that in essay, of course with the help of some other materials, newspapers, some other interviews of prominent personalities of our time, which we will definitely guide you time to time. Those topics, suppose the issue is non-violence in the world, the issue is tolerance in the world, the issue is women and her condition in India and the world, the issue is environment as well as consumerism, which is very much, a big problem modern day time. But if you have a background of history, you can always use 1/3 of your essay with the examples of Ashoka, of Akbar, of Mahatma Gandhi, of any such famous events of history of India and world. So your essay would have more weight, and then you have better chance to score 130 to 150. One area where history optional is going to help you a lot, and that area is interview. In personality test, they are going to ask you anything related to India and your connection with that idea of India. What is this idea of India? Very beautifully mentioned in the preamble of Indian Constitution. But do you know that to make that constitution's preamble, our makers took too much time to write each words very carefully. We the people. The idea of liberty, equality, fraternity, justice, etc., is very much rooted in modern history, freedom struggle. So, if a student is good in that area, at least 10 to 20% of his time in interview, he would perform very well with the help of historical topics. That's the reason why large number of students opt for history optional. And last, in the preliminary exam, as you know, there are 100 questions and you have to score around 105 to 10 on an average in general candidate, so that you are in safe zone. 20 questions to 21 questions every year they're asking from history, be it ancient, medieval, modern, or post independent history. If a student who has opted history optional, he or she would be far better than a student who say have opted some other optional. So if you can score say 16 out of 20, then you have fair chance to score 105 to 10. That is also a reason why good number of students choose history optional. There is a myth also about history optional. It is lengthy. No, it is lengthy in prelims exam. In the main exam, it is as short as any other subject, be it anthropology or literature or any other. Why it looks lengthy? Because you think that you have to study history from Stone Age to IT age, which is true to some extent, but you don't know the trend of the question of last 5 or 10 years, that from where they are asking question, how much time I have to devote for preparation of the main exam, what are the sources, and even if I read a book and material, I don't understand because I don't have the background of history. And that's exactly the purpose why I decided to come for optional history after the demand from many students since many months. And what I have seen, and since I taught long optional history also, what I know is that the same amount of time which you generally take in political science or geography or public art or anthro or any other subject, history would take more or less same time. Too much books would not never help in IS preparation, so it would not help in history also. Very good book, limited book, that of course I will recommend. Some quality study material we will provide. But most important part is to understand the entire grammar of this exam and the optional paper which you are choosing, like here history. For that, what first thing I decided to do is to have a trend analysis of each section: ancient, medieval, modern, and world history. As you know that paper 1 includes two sections: ancient history and medieval history. In ancient history, question number 1 would be of maps. Now the map class I will take later on in more detail. Here I would only talk about question number 2, 3 and 4 in paper A, that is ancient history, and I have taken only 5 years as a benchmark to understand the trend, because 5 years is too long in UPSC. They would quickly change the trend maybe next 3 years later. So what you can see from this chart which I have prepared based on the questions which they have asked in the last 5 years, and I designed this topic in the format of, as you can see, number 1, historiography. In historiography, there are two things: archaeological sources and literary sources. Indus Valley civilization, you all know the name: early Vedic, later Vedic, Jainism, Buddhism, Mauryans age, post Mauryans, influx of foreigners, art and sculptures, then Gupta period, Harsha, science and tech, regional kingdoms. This division, I did it on the basis of syllabus given by UPSC, as well as taught in all top universities of India, that is Central University. since luckily I have myself enough experience in both university system as well as in coaching institution. So that experience would help you to understand from where the questions are asked, from where they're asking more. For instance, if you look at here and you can see each mark of this yes is, this question was asked in 2019, this question was asked in 2018, this was asked in 2016 and 15. If there are 2 marks, that means in this year there are 2 questions related to early Vedic age. So that is what the graph shows. Now, if you just study scientifically that from where they have asked more, and when I and you together prepare for 2021, where to give more emphasis, the strategy should be like this. In ancient history, I would suggest question number 1 is compulsory. In medieval history, question number 5 is compulsory. You have no other option, you have to do that. Now, in ancient history, question number 1 is of maps, which again, as I told, we will discuss in detail. Question number 5 in medieval history is actually the topic A, B, C, D, that is the subtopics they would ask. Now, in ancient history, the question number 2, 3, and 4. In medieval history, question number 6, 7, and 8. So, in all, you have 8 questions. Each question would have subsections like 2A, 2B, 2C. That means once you chose 2, you have to choose all A, B, C. Now you have no other options. Once you chose 3, you have to choose all A, B, C. Now you have to answer all A, B, C, because each one would have marks against it, whether 10 or 15, that they would decide. Generally 2 questions of 15 marks, 1 question of 20 marks. That means 50 question for each mark. So 5 into 50, that is 125 marks for paper 1, and that is exactly for paper 2. So what my suggestions to you is that question 1 you have to do in any case, but out of these 3 you choose 2, whichever 2 you on that day decide, whether 2 or 3 or 3 and 4. Whereas out of these 3 you do only 1. So you have 2 from here, 1 from here, 3. This fifth is compulsory, 4. This one is compulsory, 5. So as I told, you have to attempt 5 questions in all. But why I am insisting that you should attempt 2 questions from ancient history rather than 2 questions from medieval history other than compulsory question is the syllabus of ancient history is much smaller than the medieval history, number 1. Number 2, in medieval history, you have lot of regional kingdoms between 8th to 18th centuries, other than some big kingdoms like the Delhi Sultans, like the Mughals. You have to read the Marathas, the Vijayanagar, the Bahmanis, the Bengal state, the Kashmir state, the Gujarat state. And the problem for many students is that when they are suppose studying early medieval history, 8th to 12th century, so too many events are happening together. So it's very difficult for many students to remember, to recall, to reproduce. Whereas in ancient history, if you are smartly preparing, which I'm sure we are going to do it very smartly in the next few months, you have to get it, as you can say, 1 question from Indus Valley, Vedic civilization, Jainism, Buddhism, Mauryan period, post-Mauryan period, and Gupta period, right? As you can see, these are so important topics that no teacher can afford to ignore these important areas. Once you prepare, you would see that they had to ask questions from these areas. So let's discuss first those important areas one by one, and after this analysis, I would start my classes right from Indus Valley Civilization, and in that class, you would get the entire breakup of the topic, that when we talk Indus Valley Civilization, what does it mean? Like here you can see I have given a breakup of Mauryan age under kings, administration, art, India, decline, etc. Similarly, in Indus Valley, I will give you that breakup in my classes. Here in the trend you can see in 2019, the questions were asked from two important sources, archaeological and literary sources. Now, what is the importance of archaeological sources? You have to learn. Of course, we will discuss, because history is written on two important pillars. One pillar is source and one pillar is interpretation. Now, minus any of the source, history would collapse. So, while large number of people in India and media people and you the commoners do not understand that what is the importance of source. Every source which appears a source may not be a source. Archaeological sources are scientifically examined by the scholars called archaeologists. They consult with the historians, and historians may or may reject that archaeological sources. They may say, okay, this may belong to a particular period which you think 2000 years old, but this is not the use which you say. That use of that stone, that pottery, that sculpture, that tools has to be interpreted by a historian who has expertise in that particular subject. So, many archaeological sources in ancient history we have already excavated beneath the earth, over the surface of earth. Mohenjo-daro, Harappa, Dholavira, Lothal, Kalibangan are sites which we have excavated. You must have heard coins of ancient time. You must have heard edicts of Ashoka and other rulers. You must have heard potteries of different periods. You must have heard tools and weapons and many other artifacts of different period. These are important archaeological sources. So, the questions which they are asking, how much that archaeological sources are helping in reconstruction of the past. We are in 2020. We want to understand economy of 2000 years back, because our economy is in bad shape. So, we want to show through history, look, India's economy in the past was a golden era, we used to call golden bird. Now, why shall I believe you? Why shall anybody believe me that India's ancient past or medieval past was a golden era? Just because I am saying no, there must be some data, there must be some scientific proof. Like in post-Mauryan period, when we study Kushan period, Indo-Greeks period, Satavahanas period, Sangam period, we find large number of coins were found in different parts of India. We find large number of pure gold coins in which the purity of gold in the gold coin was much higher than the purity of gold in Gupta period. In the Rajput period, we don't find coins at all. What does it indicate? The larger number of coins from a particular period and place indicates market economy. That the market economy in that period was flourishing. You know, in every period, there are certain indicators of growing economy. For instance, when you say today that the jobs are shrinking, what is the data you have? Labor Ministry. And you just check it, the Labor Ministry data, and you would find that how many people were employed, how many people were fired, how many people got salary, etc. So, in modern time, of course, we have more indicators. In ancient and medieval time, our indicators were limited. For instance, when we have more ruins of the cities, as in the ancient past, you heard about Patliputra and Kashi and Mathura and Urayur and various port cities from the western coast, that is Bharuch to Sopara to Muzri to Coromandel to Tamralipti, all these port city and the cities in general indicates industrial economy, commercial activities, and market economy. So, in the post-Mauryan period, you would find that a lot of such archaeological sources in the form of coins, in the form of ruined cities are available. That is what they are nowadays asking, that how you understand that archaeological sources help in reconstruction of history, of ancient history or medieval history. Similarly, there are a lot of literary sources, as we all know, in ancient time, and those literary sources are in our Vedas, in our Buddhist literature, in our Jain literature, there are some foreign accounts. All these literatures have shed lights on various aspects of human activities, be it political, social, economic, cultural activities. So sometimes they can ask very specific question. With the question also, I will tell you what are the questions they have asked on archaeological as well as literary sources. So that topic is about history writing. We call it historiography. For historian, these are raw materials. Without the raw materials, you cannot make any final product. For historians, the two essential raw materials are archaeological sources and literary sources. But it is a job of historians to first verify how authentic that source is. Second is how much it is reliable on his interpretation. For instance, Harsha had a great poet writer in his court called Ban Bhatt, and he wrote a very famous book, Harshcharit. Now, if we want to know about Harsha, Harshcharit is a very good source to know about Harsha's character, Harsha's policies, Harsha's achievements, etc. But a good historians of our time would not and shall not rely only on Ban Bhatt. Why? Because Ban Bhatt was a paid writer. Ban Bhatt was living in the court of Harsha. So can we imagine that Ban Bhatt would write against Harsha? In the court of Akbar, there was a great historian, Abul Fazl. He wrote Akbarnama in 3 volumes, and the last volume is called Aine Akbari, which means Law of Akbar, that is in Persian, written somewhere around 1595 to 96. Now, any historian who want to research on Akbar or his period has to read Akbarnama Aine Akbari. There is no other way. But if that historian relying only on Akbarnama and Aine Akbari, then he would miss many other points and he can never be a good historian. He can never write a critique on Akbar's policy. That is why it is very important for historians to know the importance of a particular source, archaeological or literary, but also know what is its limitations and how much I have to now rely on some other sources. Of course, also must be reliable, also must be authenticated by some other peer groups, by some other experts of that particular branch, right? Just giving an interesting question UPSC asked long back, I have in my mind. The question was, this is for optional paper. Harsha was great. Harsha was great. Ban Bhatt made him greater. Comment. Now this question full marks, and you know before 2013 the question was of 60 marks, one question. Now this question of 60 marks and you have to write in more than 500 words. Now you have to write mostly in 250 words. Harsha was great, Ban Bhatt made him greater. See, imagine Akbar was great and Abul Fazl made him larger than life size, Akbar-e-Azam, Zille-Ilahi, Farrez-de. But we know that Akbar was also a human being, Akbar was also a ruler, he was also doing some mistake, some blunder, some very cruel thing which he did, you would learn also in my classes. So that is why the literary sources of ancient and medieval period are very, very important. Now, you may not know one interesting point. The more we go ancient, the more we have to rely on archaeological sources. The more we come to modern period, the more we are relying on literary sources. Why so? Because in ancient period, we do not have too much literary sources. For instance, in Stone Age, no literary sources. In Harappan period, we have their literature not yet deciphered. In Vedic period, the books which were written were not compiled in the same period, though it was composed in that period. So there is a problem. Second problem is that in India generally, the history writing was not as strong as it was in Greeks and Romans and Arabs and Iranians. So we do not know much about our ancient rulers, say, who ruled in the BC period, the kind of details which you find about the Greek rulers, Romans, about the Iranians and the Arabs. We have only limited information, say, about Ashoka, mostly through his edicts. And the Buddhist literature related to Ashoka came after 200-300 years death of Ashoka. So again, its reliability is a big issue. That's the point they are going to check critically. Are you aware about that aspect or not? Whenever we talk about, say, uh, ancient history. In medieval history, you would find that lot of literary sources are available, and the role of archaeological source are now limited. For instance, if you want to know about Shah Jahan and his policy, you don't have to rely on Taj Mahal. You don't have to rely on Jama Masjid or any building which he built, Diwan-e Aam, Diwan-e Khas. But you can rely on Padshah Nama written by Abdul Hamid Lahori. You can rely on Shah Jahan Nama written by Inayat Hussain. Now, that is very interesting in medieval time. In modern time, when we write about British history and our freedom struggle, then you don't need at all any archaeological sources. To study Mahatma Gandhi, you don't have to rely on Gandhi's specs and Gandhi's, khidao, or Gandhi's, dhoti and kurta, or Gandhi's personal belonging as compared to Kanishka when we are talking about Kanishka and Ashoka. So even if, teeth of Buddha was found somewhere, that becomes a very reliable thing. But about Mahatma Gandhi, all his writings are available, whether Gandhi himself wrote or somebody else wrote in his period or just after his death. So, in the British period, since 1748, we find regular series, what is called archival materials, kept in National Archives of India. Luckily, I had worked one full year in National Archives of India, then another year in a central university in their archives department, and exclusively on modern Indian history and freedom struggle. So I have seen all those original documents, including original Gandhian letters, all the freedom fighters, and even the ancient manuscripts of Jains, Buddhists, Muslims, and others, kept very scientifically in National Archives of India at Janpath, Delhi. In your state also, in each capital you have state archives, which I'm sure you never visited, because in the museum you visited because your school teacher forced you to go. But archives, even your school teacher did not know what is archives. That is what I understand very well. Archives is a place where historical documents in its original form are kept in a scientific environment with technically equipped people who preserve it for the scholars and sometime for general audience during, showcasing, say, Gandhi's pictures or freedom struggle pictures or some of their writings, etc. So that place is called archives. In your computers and laptops also, there is a corner somewhere called archives where you preserve your study materials, your other notes, right? So that is how the archives. An archivist is a person who has done some technical courses related to this, which I did it along with my history. So I know little bit more than my colleagues about archives and material. Like the building which is there must have a temperature around 24 to 25 degree all the time. The humidity must be around 55%, because the papers which is having very acidic value, you must have seen yellowish paper, uh, some teachers carries in your school and college days. Why it becomes yellow from white? I hope you know this little bit chemistry. So they fumigate that, then they make it little more scientific way of preserving. Like one is fumigation, that all those insects and bacteria are removed, and one is making it file properly so that you can all study, laminate it so that it does not get torn away, because after few years and few centuries it may go into pieces. Nowadays they are digitalizing also. Before that they did it microfilm, microfiche, so that you don't have to touch each time the original papers. Historians uses those archival materials without which they cannot write modern Indian history. So every good historian has to visit those archives, whether in India or abroad, has to read those letters written by Cornwallis to Curzon to Dalhousie to Gandhi to Nehru to Jinnah to Ambedkar, whether these documents are officials or private. They have to read. Sometimes their personal diaries becomes very important. Sometimes their emails in those days was not, SMS was not, Instagram was not. But what was the shorter form? Telegram. Okay, nowadays we have a Telegram, also messengers. But in those days, Telegram, which was introduced in India in 1853 through a machine called telegraph. So that telegram became a historical document. Now suppose Bhagat Singh writing telegram to some of his friend, and it was detected by a CID that they are meeting and planning, and that telegram is now kept in archives of Lahore. So that becomes a source material for historians, that why Bhagat Singh was arrested, because his communication was intercepted by a CID officer. Now, this kind of history becomes interesting as well as authentic, because you are relying on original source, that is the telegram, that is the letters, that is the official file. So, history is written based on authentic material. That is why they have incorporated this topic, literary source and archaeological sources, right? Now, what point you have to understand, that in Indus Valley civilization, as you can see, the questions they are asking almost every year. What does it mean? They expect from you as well as from me, and sometimes two question also, as you can see, that you can't afford to ignore this topic. Now, each time the questions are different. Within this, the questions are different. Sometimes they ask this and this question together, which I would explain with the questions also in my next lecture, that they compare Indus Valley with Vedic period. And there are certain topics which are comparables. You should know which topics are comparables, so that you do not do vague comparisons. For instance, they may compare Indus with Vedic, early Vedic with later Vedic, Jainism with Buddhism, both with Brahmanism and Vedic religion. They may compare Mauryans with post-Mauryan economy. They may compare Mauryan administration with post-Mauryan administration, Mauryan administration with Gupta administration. That comparable is possible because by and large they were in the same period, that is ancient Indian history. But so far, I have never seen in the last 10 years any question they compared Ashoka with Akbar, compared Akbar with Jawaharlal Nehru. Well, these three were compared in Amartya Sen book, Argumentative Indians. Now, Amartya Sen wrote in general, he is not writing and claiming himself as a historian. But you know, Ashoka and Akbar and Jawaharlal Nehru belong to three different era. Their periods and demands were different. So you cannot compare these three at all. In any case, Nehru was ruling, rather governing in a democratic setup, whereas those were monarchs and rulers in autocratic setup. So there is no comparison at all. So do not be afraid of this type of thought that they may ask any comparison. No, there is a logic behind that comparison which we will help you, I am sure, in my next classes also you would learn from where the comparisons are possible. So in Indus Valley, one question only on Indus and one was comparison. But all these years which they asked from 2019 to 2015, what we noticed that they asked questions, you know, from different aspects of Indus Valley civilization. Sometimes they may ask about town planning, sometimes they may ask about material life, their economic activities, sometimes they may ask about their decline. Now that is how when we prepare, we must prepare from all the possible angles. Now, next topic is, you know, if you know, early Vedic and later Vedic. These are two parts of Vedic age from 1500 to 600 BC. But sometimes they exclusively ask on early Vedic, as you can see here, here. Sometimes exclusively on later Vedic, as you can see. And with the questions, I would also help you to understand. Sometimes they ask Vedic as a whole and then may compare it with Indus Valley civilization, right? Both Jainism and Buddhism emerged almost together in the same region among the same set of people, like both were Kshatriyas. Both had many things in common, like they opposed Vedic religion, they opposed Vedic rituals, they opposed various kinds of material culture, they opposed the lifestyle of the very people in which they lived, and gave a solution to the problem which emerged in their time, that is 6th to 5th century BC. Questions which they asked are very interesting. For instance, one question was that it was rooted in the contemporary social, environment rather than religion. It was a movement. Now, most religion actually started as a movement. Over a period of time, it might have become a religion. For instance, when Guru Nanak started teaching, he was just like one of the many bhakti and Sufi saints of medieval time. But today Sikhism is a religion. And if you know, Guru Nanak never intended and never said that I am going to start a new religion which would be called as Sikhism and you have to keep this turban and beard, etc. In those days, almost all the saints would keep this turban and beard because they did not have Gillette blade like me who can shave every day. Don't take it seriously. They in those days had a tradition of keeping beard because all the saintly people had a tradition. The reasons could be many. If you see any greats in ancient history, keeping beard was very common people. Nowadays, our young cricketers are also keeping it, but that is fashion. So the point I'm making is that in Sikhism, the teachings of Guru Nanak became the basis of their religion. That teaching is not again new. It is found in Islam, it is found in Hinduism, found in Buddhism also. So what he tried to address some of the issues of his time, and some of the followers who thought that these ideas are very good and with these ideas we can solve our socio-economic, socio-political problem. So it emerged as a religion. History tells that whether Jainism or Buddhism or Christianity or Islam or Sikhism, any other religion, it started basically as a movement. In some case, the political force may be more than than the social and spiritual. In some case, the spiritual force may be more dominant. And why so? That also is very interesting part which you would learn, I hope, in my classes. Mauryan's age is very important for any reason in history, and as you can see that there are few topics which I deliberately kept here so that you understand. One is about the kings, but you know, two kings are only important for you people as far as the Mauryans were concerned, and these two people were Ashoka as well as Chandragupta Maurya. So in Vedic period, what we notice that they are asking questions from almost every year. Only this you can see there is no question, but here you see the question, at least they came from later Vedic period. So Indus Valley civilization and Vedic age, both early and later Vedic age, is something which we have to prepare in such a way that let them ask any question, you are ready to answer. Now, Jainism, Buddhism is also important, and you can see that they have asked good question, but not necessarily every year. Mauryan age, again as I told, that there are kings on Ashoka, Chandragupta on which they can ask, but they would not be interested in knowing about the character of the king or their any personal traits as such, achievements. In case of Chandragupta, one achievement which is very important and talked about, his role in administration, because he was regarded as the first in India who gave a centralized administration to a vast territory, that is India. That became like a role model for many other administrators and kings in future. So whenever a question on Chandragupta, his role as an administrator becomes more important. Another possibility on Chandragupta is like this, that how he came to power with the help of Chanakya, also known as Vishnugupta, after killing Dhananand or the Nandas dynasty. So that part is possible in the main. When it comes to Mauryan administration, art and culture of Mauryan period, then again you have to be careful that what kind of questions possible. So far they have not asked directly in the last 5 years as far as the art of Mauryan is concerned, but we have to be ready. And of course in my class we will discuss that also. Now post Mauryan history, if you can see, that is a very long period. 2nd century BC to 3rd century AD, almost 500 years, in which you have to study the arrival and influx of lot of foreigners like Indo-Greeks, like Kushanas, Shakas and Parthians. What contributions they had over India in literature, in science, in our culture. Questions they have already asked on that, we will discuss that also. Then in the period that is post-Mauryan, there are three famous sculptural art which developed: Gandhari School of Art, Mathura School of Art and Amravati of School of Art. There is a possibility they can ask on that particular art itself, or there is a possibility they can connect one art with another art, and with the question of course I will help you how to understand that. Sangam period is 1st to 3rd century AD generally, in which the Cholas, the Cheras and the Pandyans ruled in the southern part of India, that is Tamil Nadu and Kerala. The literature produced, however, belongs to little later period, 6th to 7th century AD, but it reflects the polity, society and economy of 1st, 2nd, 3rd century AD. You have to know about those literature first, then you have to know what is mentioned in those literature related to their society and culture, which we will certainly discuss. Now post-Mauryan is important mainly for its economic activities, within which Indo-Roman trade is one very important topic which we will of course discuss. You can see in 2019 two questions, 2018, 2016, 2015. They are asking regularly questions from that area. Why so? Because in the entire ancient history, if one period can be called as the most developed economically period, it was post-Mauryan period. And that is why uh, any historian who is making questions from ancient history, and if in his mind or her mind is post-Mauryan, the first thing which would be in his mind is the economy. You have to understand that when a historian or when a teacher of history is preparing a questions for your optional paper, he has some guidelines from the UPSC or state services. But don't forget, he or she may himself be a historian who wrote books, series of articles. He has his own likes and dislikes also. For instance, if you ask me, I have my own likes in modern history, my own likes in ancient history, my own likes in medieval history. So even if I don't want, in my subconscious mind, there would be some questions on Ashoka or Buddha or Huensong, because to me these are very important people. But maybe in some other historian's mind, they may think more about Mahavira than Buddha. They may think more about Vaishnavism than Buddhism. They may think more about some Arab travelers than Chinese travelers. That is because the likes and dislikes of each teacher and historians are very different. So there is an element of teachers who are preparing the question also in the making of all these questions, apart from UPSC's guideline. So what UPSC can tell, okay, this question was asked last year, you please don't ask this. This is the syllabus. This is the last 5-year trend. But the teacher who is preparing, they may be 1 or 2 or 3, they also have their personal likes and dislikes about the topic and characters. That is why you find sometime a question which I think why they ask, but yet they ask. That is because the likes and dislikes of each individuals are different. So why I am telling you? I am telling you because when you prepare from your likes. You like Indus Valley very much. You may not like Sangam literature. Why? Because you are a North Indian, you don't want South Indian. Now you are a Tamilian, you like Sangam literature very much because that you studied in your school days, in your local college and television serials, etc. But you don't like about say Shungas, about Kanwas, okay, because Mauryas are important, so you read, but you don't read about say some lesser known rulers or topic of North India. That is your biasness. In history and in the preparation of civil services, what care one has to take is that no personal likes and dislikes should be reflected when you prepare. You be ready for the personal likes and dislikes of the teacher. That may surprise you, but I hope once we prepare, our student would not be surprised. Why? Because we are ready. We are ready because we know that this question could be asked, not necessarily it is important, but because Cholas are important for some teachers than the Mauryas. So you have noticed that there are questions on these Cholas and some regional kingdoms, which I will show through my questions which was asked in last few years. Okay, Gupta period is very important for many reasons. I have given one interesting point in E as a golden era. Though this question they have never asked, but be ready in next 1 year or even next few years. Why so? Because history is a continuous dialogue between past and present. Many people in modern India believe that my root is linked with this past. So, a particular group of Indians may connect with Mauryans more than Guptas. A particular people may connect more with medieval than ancient. A particular people may connect more with Guptas than Mauryas. The reasons are purely political and sometimes cultural, mostly ignorance. They don't know about their own generation 5 years back who were your grandpa's grandpas. You don't know the name, I am sure. How would you know 500 years back what was your identity and from which community you came to this point? So why you are thinking that you have a connection with the Guptas or Mauryas or Mughal? This is purely modern political debate which I have seen from parliament to streets in India, and most of these people have no knowledge about history. So as A.L. Basham once said, History should be read out of curiosity, out of interest, rather than out of certain political purposes. Here I would suggest you study history for two purposes: A, to become IAS, and B, for interest. Both of these are very important for you people. So, golden era, I will definitely tell why it is called, who are the people, and is it really a golden era? Was any period of history of ancient or medieval golden era? Then what is your definition of golden era? What is my definition of golden era? That is also a matter of debate. Okay. So far, Harsha looks very poor in this entire history debate, right? But you know, he was so important king that I wonder why he has never been asked in the last 5 years. But UPSC is always about unpredictability. If asked next year and you are not ready, then so I would definitely tell you to prepare all these 12 topics which I have given a list. One topic again they have not asked is science and technology in ancient history is completely ignored by UPSC so far. But it is so important topic that you can't afford to ignore when you are preparing. I have some interesting notes also on that which I would distribute it to you, written by some prominent scholars very briefly, and in my class also I will explain. So, just my class and that note suffice, then you have to practice in the test, and one full question of ancient science and technology which would help you in your prelims also, because in GS prelims there are certain questions which they are asking. Even students who have opted history are struggling. Why so? Because their knowledge base of that subject is not broader. So, at least in my class you would do much better, not only for your optional but your GS history. Out of 20, I hope you can do 16 to 18. Now, these are the trends which, as I told, which we have to discuss partly in our next few days classes and partly in our series of classes which we will have in the next weeks and months. So, first topic after this lecture would be on Indus Valley civilization. Archaeological and literary sources I will tell only when we have gone at least half of the history, deliberately, because this becomes little bit more serious, little bit more dry, little bit more technical. So, in the very first lecture, I don't want you to bombard with those technicalities, and you may not enjoy in the beginning. That is why I just wanted to tell first about a topic. You all are aware about it, you know something, and how to prepare for this exam. That only thing which I have to help you. So, I have divided Indus Valley under various subheadings which you would learn. So, I would suggest you, if you have taken a subject like history, attend all my classes of history optional, which would be in a span of 180 to 200 hours in all, spreading over 4.5 months, which is more than enough. And in each classes, you would get a the topics which we are going to discuss in its complete form, that is subtopics. B, the questions which were asked last 5 years, that question also I will display here on a screen. C, the possible questions, that what we believe, and I have collected from various sources like universities, like various state commissions, some my colleagues and myself have made it, and those questions also I will give you. You have to practice yourself those questions. Then when we conduct sectional test, some of those questions we will ask maybe in a redesigned form, so that you write what you studied in the classes and the material, which also I will provide some PDF form. Also I will give some sources. You don't have to suppose read entire A.L. Basham Wonder that was India. So, I would just suggest, okay, read this chapter, this chapter, this chapter, enough for this topic. Limited number of books and resources, smartly studied and writing practice is the key for the success. 300 to 320 is very much gettable. Many my students got it and today they are IAS, IPS and whatever in civil services. No optional is good or bad in itself. It is the students who make the optional good or bad. That's what we all firmly believe. And if you have seen that almost every optional has its representation in UPSC. Few optional like history, political science, sociology, geography, public ad are very popular among the students since many years now, and I can say decades. And one reason is that the materials are available, teachers are available. For instance, if you have opted geology, you won't find teachers easily. That is why even a student who have done MSc geology, they may opt for history or geography or sociology. So that is also important in in civil service preparation, because without the help of professionals, you yourself would take 2 years to understand the entire optional, and no guarantee you would go to the depth which is required, because in the books, in the material, the author who wrote, they died mostly. Bipin Chandra also died, R.S. Sharma also died, A.L. Basham died long back, and many of them who are very old, like Sumit Sarkar Sahab, like Irfan Habib, like Romila Thapar, they don't teach you. They taught long back in academics. Now, there is no connection between you and them. That connection is a teacher like us who can tell what they wrote, what they said, and what is important for your exam, rather than they said many things which is important for PG student, MPhil student, PhD student. That is not relevant for you, because in 250 words you have to know how limited points you have to add with limited words. That is very important art. Civil service exam, I tell in every class, is a rule bound exam. In my opinion, it is like a boxing in ring. You know, boxing in ring means once you are in ring, the two players and a referee, every punch has to be used as per the law. The moment you gave a wrong punch, there is a whistle and points are deducted. In this exam, the moment you write a wrong points, it's not only they would ignore, but they may deduct, because you have bluffed. If you have written even outside the scale, outside the scale, they can deduct. If you have written more than the words, they may deduct. And I checked it from none other than former UPSC chairman PC Hota, some members, some panelists, some teachers, and I am regularly in touch with them that what is instructions coming from UPSC and what do you do when you get this kind of instructions. Most of them said that the moment you disobey their order, that you have written outside the line, they would cut the marks. And I was shocked, how can you deduct, which is a simple mistake. We in college hardly do that. And they said, no, it is a rule bound exam. They are going to be an officer. How can they violate the rule? That is what their mindset. Right or wrong, you can debate it. Our job is why to take risk. So I would suggest that treat it like a boxing in a ring where you have a very strict law. Problem is, you people came from a college and university in India, which we all are product, which exam was like WWE wrestling. You know, it is an open stage, there is no ring and there is no rule. Or if there is any rule, I never understood. If you understood, please tell me. Anybody can punch anywhere. Then from the stage, the first thing they do, they hit the referee and referee is out. And then they come down and then they start chasing each other up to each mohallas. That means in your college and university days, you started from a point, ended from a point, when there is any connection between the question and your answer, you did not know, yet you passed, yet you got good marks. In UPSC, forget that. It's very rule bound exam. Now that is the reason why sometimes a very brilliant student I noticed failed in this exam, and an average student passed and became an IAS. I have many my students whose entire background was different, and they took optional history and they passed. And the person who did MA history both wrote main, both passed prelims, both wrote main. But the person who passed MA history from top university, so-called top in India, and failing not once and twice and thrice, and a person who had no background, he was engineer, he was hotel management graduate, he was MBA, and he wrote history and got 300. What is the reason? He wrote as per the rule. He did not know too much about history, only he knew that question and that answer. And that is exactly what we are here. There is a question, there is an answer. You don't have to be a historian to write a good answer in civil service. You just have to be a good and obedient student of history, so that when you write as per the law prescribed by UPSC, and the teacher who is checking copy can give you a minimum that I can sure is 50 to 55, and maximum it's all up to you. It can go even 350, and many students have got it. So why don't you chase 300 to 330? Possible with a scientific way of study, with my help, and of course your own efforts. So see you now in my regular classes starting from Indus Valley civilization. So join me on this IS Baba, and very good team. I have found these are dedicated people, technically well equipped, and many of them have experience to conducting all type of tests as well as classes of for civil services examination. And good part is that they all are young and energetic, so they can help you a lot even beyond official time. So welcome to all in my classes on ancient Indian history on IS Baba platform. Thank you very much.